All right, let's introduce Dave. Joining us today is the one and only Dave Jackson, who was podcasting while the rest of us were still figuring out how to set up MySpace pages, and who's now in the Podcasters Hall of Fame for teaching thousands of creators how not to sound terrible. Dave's discovered the most podcasters are losing listeners and money because they're treating their websites like digital business cards instead of what they actually are: conversion engines that transform casual listeners into superfans and paying customers. Please welcome the head of podcasting at Podpage and our friend, Dave Jackson. Dave, welcome aboard, man.
Gentlemen, glad to be here. I got to tell you, your opening riff, as a guitar player, it's hard. I finally just was like, screw it. It's in C. I'm going to figure that. I'm like, I am playing that the minute we're done here. It's just one of those where there are certain things as a guitar player, you hear that, and like every gene in your body's like, must play riff now, must play riff. And I'm like, I can't. I got to talk to Jim and Chris, but I will be doing that later.
Amazing. And there's a ton of folks here that are in the chat. Welcome here. Make anything easy, saying woohoo. Make anything easy. We haven't seen Jeff in a minute. So Jeff, thank you for coming to the show. And of course, James Hicks, Dr. Hicks, the perfect timing since he just asked you about this show earlier. Yeah, Dave, you do a ton of stuff, and playing guitar was something like when I first, went to Podfest and I was like, hey, wait a minute, that's Dave Jackson up on stage playing a Santana song at a podcast conference. And then I kind of did a little recon and saw like you had played guitar for years in bands, and I don't know, maybe 3-4 months ago, I saw you, just decide you wanted to plug in your guitar, and you just shredded. You just did this riff as the start of a video or a short or whatever. And I was like, go. How long have you played, man?
I tried to play when I was 5, but my fingers were too small and I was left-handed. And so I had a little plastic guitar and that didn't work. And then my brother, who played the guitar, strung the guitar upside down. And so because all the books were made for right-handed people. So it was trying to learn how to play the guitar in a mirror. And so I remember one day I was in first grade, I could not find a baseball mitt anywhere and I could not find scissors. And I just went, all right, enough of this. I'm not going to be left-handed. And I just quit. So, I was writing, I don't remember what I was writing with back then, but I was just like, I'm just done with this, which actually turns out to be really good if you want to play the guitar, because your left hand is the one that does all the noodling. And so I picked it back up when I was about 11 and played, the classics, Jimmy Crack Corn and I Don't Care and She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain. And my brother's playing AC/DC stuff. And I said, I want to do that stuff. And he showed me these things called bar chords, which means you can play chords all over the neck. And he said it was weird. He goes, I showed you 2 chords. And he goes, and I came back in a week and you were already better than I was. And it was just a case where it's weird. I can hear something and kind of go, I guessed when I heard your intro, I go, I think that's a C. So I don't have perfect pitch, but I'm pretty sure. I know the last 2 are B. I know the riff without playing it. So there's that kind of thing. And my first gig, I think I was 14. And, my mom was cool enough to where we had the station wagon, green with the brown paneling on it. We threw all the gear in there, and me and my buddies went over and played a pajama party. And so, you push the couch out of the way and there's 9 girls in their pajamas. I think I made $10 playing some Tom Petty.
Big money.
And I'm like, that's it. I know what I'm doing. So over the years, I've just been doing it. And then the last band I was in was just a case where, number one, they called me Reverend Jackson because I was the only person in the band that didn't have at least one, because most people had 2 DUIs. And it was one of those where it was hilarious. When I joined the band, the drummer had a bracelet on his ankle. So that was kind of fun. And we got gigs because the bass player was on the radio, but way upper North Ohio, 107.5 The Fox. And so he would get gigs at places where he would do like live appearances, but we would literally show up and play to like 3 people. And it was like,
Wow.
this really isn't that much fun. And the lead singer moved to Florida, and that was the end of that. But and that was, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. So, and now it's funny because when I call, I've tried to get back in other bands. It'd be like, electric blues band looking for guitar player. And I'll call and they'd be like, great. And then I'll see in the ad where it's like 25 to 35 age. And I'm like,
oh, geez.
Maybe 60.
Ageism.
Like this, yeah. And so, and I was like, oh man, I'm the grandpa now. Cause I remember when I was their age, like, why is grandpa calling on our ad? And I'm like, oh man, I'm grandpa now. So, but I kind of don't miss it because I mean, on one hand, the fun part is on stage, but you're really getting paid to lug all this crap around and put up with drunk people going, can you play Mustang Sally? So that's always fun.
So I've always, I was a musician as well. I still can play it, enough to be dangerous. And I'm always thinking about how playing an instrument equates to what I do now, which is podcasting. So, what did you learn from playing guitar and historically through all the, maybe sitting in your room, learning Eddie Van Halen or whatever it was? Like, what did you learn that you feel like, the reason why I can do this is because of the things that I learned playing guitar?
Well, I think one of them is making a mistake on stage. That's always fun. Mm-hmm. And I found out that if you don't grimace and make a mean face at the guy who did it or whatever, nobody knows you made a mistake. Yeah. So just, and if you're doing a lead, what's really cool is if you go, and like what you do is you do that note again and stretch it up this time to where the real note's supposed to be. And it sounds like you meant to do that on purpose. So you learn how to cover your mistakes.
There we go.
And kind of roll with the punches. So that's always kind of fun. And for me, it's kind of weird. Being in a band is a lot of, and this sounds very woo kind of stuff, but there's an energy there. I mean, I still have like 2 big memories. And one was we were playing the song Feeling All Right by Joe Cocker. And it was just a case where everybody was in the pocket and we had a full dance floor. And the singer he came over to me and he goes, I'm just going to say, all right, feeling good myself. He goes, we're just going to repeat that. So we're making it up on stage. And he goes, all right, feeling good myself. And I was like, okay, one of my backgrounds is in choir. So I came up with a harmony. And then the bass player threw in a harmony. And we sat there and just did that for what was probably like 2 minutes, which is a long time to not really, the keyboard player is soloing his face off. But it was just fun to improv. And it was just the whole time I'm like, oh, this is so fun. This is just it's like the whole room was grooving. So I love the fact that when you kind of put out an episode, and it's weird because it's not live. You don't have that live experience. But when you put out an episode and you wake up the next day and you have 5 emails saying that was amazing, that's always fun. So, that, and the thing I think that most people don't do is when you're a musician, you spend a lot of time in the basement, right? I mean, it took I think the last band, it took us like 4 months to learn, 40 songs. And so it's not like I learned the key C, the chord C and went, okay, all right, who's going to pay me money to play C? You kind of have to build that audience up. And so, I think a lot of people maybe don't, musicians call it woodshedding, when you're kind of putting everything together. And instead, they figure out how to plug in the microphone, how to record, and how to publish, and then instantly do it. I'm like, well, don't you kind of want to get your set together before you go public? And so I always hear people, they're like, yeah, I'm getting feedback now. And I'm like, okay, but like, didn't you say you've already launched? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, shouldn't you have gotten the feedback before you launched? And they're like, well, this is how I'm getting my feedback. And I'm like, okay, that's a way to do it. Not the way I would do it, but right. I would have done it beforehand so that your first impression is not one of like, wow, that was awful. Yeah. So that's something I've learned from musicians. So
do you feel like though, like there's that balance of starting messy, right? Or start ugly from our friend Chris Kermitzos and then just sort of learning from failures, fail fast and sort of get through that stuff. Because I think a lot of people kind of get stuck with that moment of like, I need to put frames around this, and I'm watching all these, YouTube videos of podcasters and all this thing, and they compare themselves to these people, and they never start, or they start and it doesn't happen, immediately, like it doesn't happen for everybody immediately, and then they quit. And so there's that balance of, you got to start a little bit crispy around the edges, because you don't quite know, right? But at the same time, you don't want to start like with a phone in a basement either. Like, how do you work with people to determine that balance?
I think it's you start where you are with what you got and do the best you can. And there just comes a part where I was watching your intro, and when I went flying across the screen, I was like, oh, I was in the apartment in that, because I recognized the backdrop. And I see people like, oh, your backdrop's kind of cool with the lights, and I got lights up in the ceiling. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't start here. Like, and there may be days, like I'm already kind of going, I could lose the key lights and get one of those big lights with the little cross things and we're always looking at stuff. You always want one thing else. And so you kind of start with what you got, get it to the best you can, and kind of go from there. Because otherwise, you're right. You can just never launch. I've had people that didn't launch because they couldn't find the right music. And I was like, oh, come on. Can't we, can't we find something that's close enough to, be okay? And they're like, no, it's really got to be this or that. I'm like, okay. And then they just never find the right thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're gonna pivot into the whole reason why we had you on this podcast, Dave, is, you obviously have, a ton of experience in the podcasting space. And when, I got into it years later, it was like one of those things where you can create a podcast and you have a podcast host, and that podcast host gives you a website, right? And you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. So Captivate, Libsyn, all the podcast hosts will give you a website that has your podcast on it, right? And Jim and I were somewhat specialized because we had the Amazon thing going on, and we were trying to drive people to the Amazon place. But after a while, it was just sort of like, why are we driving people to this space that maybe somebody else owns, as opposed to what our own, sort of thing is? It's outside of just Amazon. And so I wanted to start here with the whole conversation regarding podcasts and websites. Is like, so when a podcaster says they don't need a website because their podcast is available on Spotify or their podcast is available on YouTube, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite is if we go back to Facebook. I remember seeing television ads for, build your website on Facebook. Just tell your friends to go to facebook.com/ Chris and Jeff. Well, okay, but then I've been kicked out of my own Facebook group. I went in, I do a thing every Friday called Lunch with Dave. And I said, hey, Lunch with Dave starts in 20 minutes. And I was banned from my own Facebook group. And it took me about a month and a half to get back. So there's that. If we go way back in the day, mp3.com was bigger than Facebook back in the day. And I'm sorry, back in the day. And, and so, but there were musicians that would be like, oh, just go to mp3.com/Dave. And they had all these people going there, and they were, making some money on that. And then people uploaded things that they shouldn't have, and they got sued and sold and sued and sold and sued and sold. And it's nothing now. And if you didn't have some sort of newsletter or something, all these people are like, I wonder what happened to Dave. So, and then there are the people like, I'm just going to use Linktree. And I'm like, okay, that's a strategy, but there's just zero SEO. And I recently was working on a project, and I was asking people, hey, we'd like to maybe partner with you. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, I do this. This would be great. I'm like, great. Where's your website? And they'd go, I don't have one. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because again, that's a thing. And I'm like, how do you get business? Because I'm kind of politely not wanting to go, you don't have a web, what? What year is it? And they'd go, oh, we just kind of operate on referrals. And I think, so obviously you're doing really good work. Just think how much more work you would have if, instead of like, oh, here, let me write down his email address for you. And then it's on a piece of paper that they lose or whatever. It's just like, so, when people go, just anything. And if you think about it, whether it's Buzzsprout or Captivate, all those websites from the media hosts, they're not bad. They're a great place to listen and follow the show. Yeah, that'll work. And you're like, okay, great. And if I want to have them sign up for my newsletter, not really. Okay, and if I want to sell my book on that, well, kind of, you can kind of hack it. Okay, but what if I wanted to, import my reviews? No, not really. So it gets you in the game, which is good because then you can be found. But it's when you're like, okay, well, I'm ready to, take this a little more seriously. And so, and that doesn't mean Linktree or anything like that. That's just anything that's usually set it and forget it is kind of, how's that saying go? It could be good, fast, or cheap. You got to pick two, but you can't have three.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that's fast and it's cheap. It's just not very good.
Well,
so
isn't like Linktree and some of these other things are more like a response to Instagram doesn't allow you to put links in stuff, right? Or Twitter or whatever. So here's something where somebody can like click on this and then they get all of your stuff. But who actually is really clicking on that stuff? And then you're still, not only are you building on rented land, you're actually building like a rental on a rental. Like like what happens if Instagram just decides to wake up and go like, you can't do a link anymore here. It's like now you've invested all of this, which you think you're getting search engine optimization in, and it was really only built for one social media platform as opposed to something that you control, that you can drive listeners to.
Yeah, and it's one of those words like, well, it's just so simple and easy. And I'm like, okay, but can you like write something in Microsoft Word? Yeah, well, then you can build a website. It's really not that, type new, write in, call it about, write in your bio and click save. There you go. And now let's make our, it's really not that hard. So I always kind of like, why are you doing that again? Oh, just, or they'll see some big influencer. Well, the big influencer already has an audience and maybe they don't need that. But again, they could have a bigger audience, if they had an actual website. So it's, we all have our own little quirks and, but to me, I'm like, you're just missing the boat. It's really not that hard.
So this makes me, when you talk about this makes me think about like one of the struggles that when people are talking about this in particular, they think that building or having a website built for them is, number one, difficult to do, and number two, expensive, right? Mm-hmm. So they think like, I don't know how to do this. And when I Googled and I looked at Squarespace or Wix or whatever, it just, even though I don't know how to do a WordPress website or any of that kind of stuff, they think this is more mind junk to keep people from creating and doing and building their show. And so they just don't do it because they think in SEO and the witchcraft and all of that stuff, like, am I getting found? All of that stuff, it keeps them from doing it. But what I found, and what, Jim and I, use Podpage to, for our website because A, it's easy. And number two, it's not, or B, it's not that expensive. And like, that was the thing that drove me to it, was like, okay, this is somewhat quick, really professional, and doesn't cost me an arm and leg. I'm not paying thousands of dollars to somebody to build my website. And then here you go, here's the reins. And now you got to learn WordPress to figure out how to change things on the fly. So if we could, let's talk a little bit about how Podpage helps solve these issues that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, for price, like a really popular, if again, you're kind of like, I'm going for the next level up, I'm going to take this serious. A lot of people talk about WP Engine, and it's a great WordPress host. It's also almost $60 a month by the time you buy the plan that has all the stuff you need, where Podpage has a pro plan for $30 a month, and it does everything and then some. And so my favorite with WordPress is, I still have the School of Podcasting is on WordPress because it's been there for 20 years. And, but I have to have WordFence. WordFence is this kind of security thing, and probably 2 or 3 times a week, I'll get an email, hey, there are a bunch of people in Germany trying to hack your site. And I just kind of go, well, I'm glad I have it, but it's another $150 a year. So, you're like, well, that's what, 10 something a year. And then, okay, but then I want, I forget the name of the one plugin I have for sharing stuff, but it's like another $50 a year. And then I use this other special plugin because it turns out free plugins, while many of them are phenomenal, many of them then don't get updated because the guy's like, I'm not making any money at this. And WordPress is kind of fun because even though everybody kind of goes through some sort of filter to make sure that you've checked all the boxes and it should work, that's just not the way it is, because not everybody updates their software and they're on the wrong PHP or whatever it is, and that whole 9 yards. So it can be a bit of a mess at times. And so you don't have to worry about, A, the white screen of death, B, updating, plugins. That drives me nuts. Every time I log into my site, and I don't have a little bit of plugins, but I don't have a ton. And every time I log in, something needs updated. And I'm like, okay, I do that. And then I pay, even though I think the host I have has a backup, I still pay for an extra one. So it's just one of those things where the thing I love about it is it's just, Brendan came to me in 2020. And so I wasn't working there yet. And he said, hey, I have an idea for a website for podcasters. And he goes, what do you think they'd need? And I go, well, bare bones minimum, an about page, the contact page, and I guess our episodes. And he's like, okay. And he came back in about a week and said, like this. And I was like, whoa, that is cool. And I go, okay, could you, let's see, integrate PayPal and maybe Patreon and, make a page for to follow the show? And he came back in about a week and I was like, that's amazing. And so it's funny because when he hired me last July, he said, the one thing that's really going to stink about this. And I go, what? He goes, nobody's going to believe you now when you say PodPage is great. And I'll be like, well, just go back to 2020. I go, I got, plenty of pre-PodPage me working there, me saying how great it was. And so he really built it the way I advise you build a podcast, which is find out what your audience wants and give it to them. And so, my favorite was I was at Podcast Movement in DC, and we have a lot of built-in things like /follow. We'll have all your links to follow on Apple and Spotify, and /sponsors. We'll show all your sponsors and all this other fun stuff. And one of our customers came up, she said, man, I love this, but you guys don't have a /newsletter. And I'm like, surely we have a /newsletter. And I'm looking and I'm like, we don't have a /newsletter. And so I texted Brendan. I go, we don't have a /newsletter. He's like, oh, that's a really good idea. And probably within a week or two, we had /newsletter. So yeah. Bam. And so I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah. For companies like that are nimble, and those are the ones you ride. Like Ecamm comes to mind. This show right here is powered by Ecamm. Yeah. Dave, I know you use that for your live streams as well. It's like you come up with an idea and you're like, wow, boy, I really wish it would do that. And then all of a sudden, you're in there talking to Ken and Glenn, and it's in the next beta. And so like for PodPage, it's the same thing. It's just like, obviously they're not going to be able to do everything that everyone is recommending, but if you can give it a good use case and hey, podcasters really need this, to monetize or do whatever. I wanted to do this because our friend James Hicks is in the chat, and I wanted to pop up his question. By the way, Deb Eckerling is in the house. Sorry we took so long to get to you, Deb. I hope you're still hanging around. She was talking about this is completely unrelated to what we're talking about right now. But hello, Deb. Thank you for coming on the show. Former guest of the show. James Hicks is talking about this, and this is a perfect sort of segue into somewhat of a demo as well. So he's curious about the YouTube video matching feature that's offered in the elite level, but I think with James, we're at the pro level. Just full disclosure, Dealcasters in the pro level, and so when we put our RSS feed into PodPage, it matches our YouTube video. So this show, when we post our podcast on Monday, the YouTube video will be embedded in our page as a part of the pro plan. So I wanted to do this, Dave, obviously we're here, we're a live show, but this is going to be an audio podcast as well. But I wanted to do this just to kind of show everybody that's watching, and I'm going to be as descriptive as possible. Dave, please help me out too and be as descriptive as possible when we're doing this. But when you go to podpage.com and you click preview your website, you can just go in here and type in whatever your podcast is. And I'm going to type in another podcast. I'm not going to type in Dealcasters. We already have a pod page, but here's another one called Small Business Safari. And this was somebody that I talked to as a prospective cast ahead client, and it pops it in right away. So like the search engine, I don't know what you guys are using for that juice, but like, I typed in whatever. If it's available as a podcast with an RSS feed, it pops up. And then when you click on it here, it asks you what email you want it to send to. I'm going to select mine, and then like let's just say we don't have a website, even though maybe Small Business Safari does. And I hit create website, and it will come up with 20 different variations of what your website can look like and how you can kind of go in and change. Now, even if it just had one or two different types of variations for what PodPage can do, you can go in and change all of it. You can change hex codes. And I know James Hicks, who had the question, he's like, you can just say, James, what's your hex code? And he's going to give you his hex code right off the top of the dome. And so branding is super important to him. But you can see right here, Small Business Safari, and look at all of the different designs for this particular show that comes up with. And let's just say we just kind of scroll down here and we say, okay, I like dark mode. So I'm a dark mode guy. So I'm going to choose this one right here. Say hi to your new website. And it's imported 229 episodes. It's giving all of this thing, and you can then start customizing from here. If you want to turn off dark mode, you can turn off dark mode and go back to all of this stuff is free for you to kind of see how it works.
Yeah. And you go through, and it's kind of doing marketing as you're going through, as you're doing the customization, because it's kind of explaining, hey, you can also have this and you can do this or do this. And you're like, okay, next. And then goes to the next one. And once it's there, I mean, we have like 20 templates, but really you kind of just need one, because all a template is, like Chris said, oh, I love dark mode. So we're starting with, everything black in the background and white text and things like that. Where later you could go in, if you're like, oh, you know what? I don't want dark mode. Well, you could go in and change to a completely different template, or you could just go into design, colors and fonts and go turn off dark mode, and you're out of dark mode. So all the templates they're a starting spot, and you just kind of go, oh, my podcast is blue too. I'm going to choose this, or I want this, or I want that. But really, we only need one template. From there, you just kind of tweak it to however you want. And yeah, it's and then if you go all the way through and you make an account, that starts your 14-day free trial. And how that works, for 14 days, you have all the features, and you can tweak them and see however you want. And then once your 14 days is over, if you haven't upgraded already, what happens is you can go in and tweak it on day 15, and you can see the website, but nobody else can. And the reason for that, we used to have a free plan, and then bad people did bad things on the internet. They would go into to movies, and they would film movies with their phone and do, what is that called? Bootlegs. They'd make bootleg movies and sell them. They'd get a free PodPage account and then start to sell them, to the point where it started to hurt our brand. It was like, oh, those are the bootleg people. And it was just like a bad game of whack-a-mole. We would just, you'd delete them and they'd be back and this and that. So with the 14-day free trial, if you don't know if you like us or not in 2 weeks, then, like I said, you can keep going. It's just, you can't go, hey, so-and-so, can you look at this link and tell me what you think of it? Because it's now day 17 and they can't see it. But if they're behind you, they can look over your shoulder. So yeah, it's pretty handy, and you can play with it that way.
I love it too, because you integrate your RSS feed. So whatever you're using as your podcast host, it's going to give you an RSS feed, folks. And so that's the gas pedal, right? And so when you put your RSS feed in PodPage, and when you release an episode, this is the beauty that it sets up for you. It creates this page for you. It creates a search engine optimized page on your website. It will give you like a short link for it. So like in this case, next week I think it's episode 72 for us, and it'll be Dealcasters/72. And so at the top of this page, you've got your video already embedded from YouTube. You've got your player that's already embedded. We use Captivate as our podcast host. And then all the stuff that you see here is all customizable. So like this isn't just a template that like we put all of these players on here, but like if you only want like a couple of these players, you can just choose a couple of players. And all of these things like featured episodes, like your show notes that you're putting in here with all of your links are all clickable. Your chapters that you're putting into, your podcast from your host is there. You can paste your transcript into this as well. All of this is helping with search engine optimization. This is like, I know this is becoming a pod page commercial here, Dave, but I mean, like we're huge fans of it.
But like you mentioned the featured episodes, and I never really thought about this. When somebody finds your website for the first time, there's a party that goes, oh, I hope they found me when I had a really good episode as my latest one. Well, why not go into your media host, see what your most popular episodes are, and maybe put those at the top so that when somebody shows up, they're going to find your best stuff. How do you know it's your best stuff? Because it's got the most downloads. And so that's something I never really thought about that. And then you mentioned, if you put in your episode number into the episode field, and whoever again you're using, Buzzsprout or Captivate or whoever, we automatically make that short link. So that way, if this is episode 73, I can say, hey, everything we talked about, all the microphones, all this, all that, you can find everything at yourwebsite.com/73, and we automatically do that. Now we redirect to the page that actually has the typical SEO friendly this -word -this kind of thing. So that's still there for your SEO, but we automatically make that short link to redirect to the SEO one. That way, again, it's number one, it reinforces your brand, all that stuff. We have a built-in survey, and it's all, instead of saying, oh, go to mattresssite.com/Dave, or go to, whatever, insurance place / SOP27X5, you just go to mywebsite.com/sponsors, and everybody's on one page. And so they might actually go over for sponsor number one, but then they go, wait a minute, with this Shure microphone thing, and then they click on that. So you're sending more traffic to your sponsors, so that when it's time to renegotiate that contract, the sponsor's like, where do I sign? You guys keep sending me more traffic.
Yeah, so one of the tips you gave me as a member of the School of Podcasting, which we should mention, as well, is is it Fathom Analytics? Is that right, or is it?
Yeah.
So Fathom, there's two Fathoms.
There's a couple out there. Well, there's Fathom, the video thing that ties into Zoom. Right. And then there's Fathom Stats at usefathom.com, or check the show notes for Chris and Jeff's affiliate, I'm assuming, maybe. If not, you should be. There's another one, Plausible, whatever you want. Because, nothing against Google Analytics. They will tell me what my visitor had for lunch last Tuesday on a full moon. Sometimes I just want to know what's the most popular page on my website. Yeah. And so I like Fathom Stats, but there are alternatives, and some people just hate Google. They're like, I'm not going to give Google any more of my information. I'm like, okay. So
right, but we put a blog on our pod page. So so obviously our podcast goes in there, but like we also do product videos. We'll also do demonstrate the PodTrak P2, which we talked about earlier, things like that. And I'll do a blog post and put it on our pod page, and then I'll go and I'll look at our analytics, and I'll see there's a bunch of people that are hitting our website. And I'll be like, where are they coming from? And you can see they're coming in via searching for the PodTrak P2 and finding the blog post that we made on YouTube, and they're being driven into our website to like watch the demonstration of me doing the PodTrak P2, and then like, oh, maybe I'm going to listen to the podcast that you guys were talking to Deb Eckerling on. So, it's you driving people to your website, like, and being able to see that happen is like, that's the grail, right? That's what we want to do. We want to get people hanging out where we control things.
Well, and that's it. When you have your actual podcast there, when somebody goes, they Google whatever it is, they find your stuff, and then if there's a player right there and they can click play, Google goes, "That's funny. Every time we send somebody over to Jeff's site, they're there for like 19 minutes. Like that must be really good stuff." So they start moving you up the charts of SEO, and it's just because you have a podcast or because you have a blog, and that's another feature that's part of Podpage. But yeah, because Google loves good words. That's where everybody thought transcripts aren't bad, but we don't write like we talk and we don't talk like we write. So sometimes transcripts aren't, they're better than nothing. But if you haven't done anything to them, that might not be the best strategy. But they're handy. But yeah, it's and anytime somebody comes up with an idea, it's like, oh yeah, that's not because a lot of people want us to be a media host. We're not going to compete with Captivate. People want us to be a newsletter. We're not going to be MailChimp or ConvertKit or Kit or whatever they're calling themselves. Or, we're not, we're not going to be YouTube. We're not, we don't compete. We make pretty websites for people that don't want to learn how to code. And then we just integrate with everything. So if you're on Patreon or Thinkific or whatever you're doing, we can easily make a link to that.
Okay, so that was, I'm glad you brought that up. It's an excellent segue because, profit from your podcast, you're always getting asked about monetization. And so, from a monetization standpoint in Podpage, if I'm someone that's like, okay, I have to have a podcast website. I've waited on this too long, but I also know that I'm paying X amount to do this. How can I use this to, like, what are some first steps, I guess, to get some monetization going? Is it like get a buy me a coffee link on your pod page? Is it like, what are some, like, maybe some easy quick win strategies for somebody that is starting their website and people hit their page and they are listeners and they want to know how they can help make this podcast profitable?
Yeah, so figure out what's a pain point for your audience, and it doesn't have to be War and Peace. Maybe a page and a half. Come up with some sort of little lead magnet, and you can do that in Google Docs, and then save it as a PDF, and then you can sign up for Kit for free. They let you have, I think, 1,000 members for free, and you can basically go over and make your little lead magnet. Copy the code. This is as nerdy as it gets with Podpage. You copy and paste. So copy and paste the code for the sign up form. You go into Podpage and say, I want to create a mailing list. Oh, I'm using my own. Here's the code. Save. And now when people go to your website, they'll see here's my first name and my email address. And when they sign up, they're actually signing up at whoever you're using for your email list, because, people talk about how the riches are in the niches, but they're also in the newsletter. Because number one, it's almost like a friendship ring, back in the days of junior high or whatever. I am giving you my email address. I trust you enough to give you my email address. So it's kind of it's a little baby commitment. And those are the people that when you say, oh, by the way, I've got a new book out, you can sign up here. Or these are the people that you can say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this topic in the future. What do you think about it? Like, this can be your focus group, because they've already said, I want more information from you. So that would be the first thing I would say. Start your newsletter, because I know so many people that they've been podcasting for years, and then they finally come up with an idea for a product, and you're like, oh, well, you can, start talking about this in your newsletter. And they go, I don't have one. And you're like, oh, yeah, you should. And they go, ooh, yes, I should have started this 3 years. And I go, yes, you should have. It doesn't mean, if you can email on a regular basis, that's great. But if nothing else, just grab those email addresses, because you will want them later if monetization is definitely in the plan. I know my first book I wrote, I had people on my email list. They were my editors. I was just like, okay, who wants to read Dave's book first? Because it's going to be full of typos and all sorts of fun stuff. And so I had like 5 people. And I was like, okay, I sent it to the first person, fixed those, sent it to the second person and the third person. And, eventually we found them all. And but that was because they're on my email list. Those are, again, they're we pinky swore on something, and they're a little closer to me than usual. So that definitely would be one. And then there are websites like PayHip. I can never remember. I think it's PayHip. If it's not PayHip, it's HipPay, but I'm pretty sure it's PayHip. And this is a place that allows you to sell digital downloads, all sorts of fun stuff. You can sell courses over there. And the beauty of it is they don't charge you anything. It is, they take, I think it's 5%. And then of course the traditional credit card stuff. So it's 2.9% plus blah, 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 but there's no monthly fees. And so if you've ever wondered, you know what, I'm thinking about selling this product, but I'm not sure if anybody really wants it. Well, build it, or build the first half of it and then put it up for sale and see if anybody buys. And if they do, then you build the second half or something of that nature. But it's a great way to kind of test an idea of, does anybody want this? Now you can always email your people and go, hey, I'm thinking of building this, but it is a way of kind of testing the waters in some cases. And then
I found it's PayHip. So that is
yeah. PayHip was, I found that and was like, wow, this is kind of cool. It's really flexible, but they don't charge you anything. They just take a percentage. So they make money when you make money.
Yeah. So Dave, question I have is, and you kind of hit on it earlier, like people get this Linktree, and the problem I think with things like Linktree, it's like you have too many choices, right? Because you click that link and it's like, what do you want me to do? And if we give people too many choices, they do nothing. Right. So I think it's probably more important. I think the beauty of PodPage is it is simple. I think that's where you guys are onto something, because it's like, hey, I just want to get my podcast out there. I want people to see what our content is about. You're identifying that there's a great idea. Look at your most downloaded episode. But how many, we hear this all the time, Dave, and I'm sure you get lots of people in the school of podcasting, and they're like, well, how do I have people find me? Because the reality is, whether you're on Apple or Spotify, I don't know that you're there. Even if you put a podcast out with, thousands of downloads, I may not know that you're there.
Yeah. So Chris kind of already hit the nail on the head. Blogs come in really handy. Like, I just posted, my episode comes out Monday, and I'm trying to get in the habit of writing a blog post on Wednesday that's much more detailed than what came out on Monday. And then I always have a link to the episode page because Google loves backlinks. And so even though you're linking to yourself, that can help your SEO as well. And now I'm laughing because I can't remember what Jeff's question was. Oh, how do people find you? So there are things like Ubersuggest is a tool I use it's a guy named Neil Patel, who's a giant SEO guy that's not as expensive. Like SEMrush and a bunch of other these things are like, they're big bucks. And this, I think there's a lifetime deal on it. And you can kind of go in and say, I do a show about blank, and it will go, here are some keywords. This one has a lot of competition and a lot of searches for it, but this one has a fair amount of searches, but not that much competition. And so it's not a case of hitting home runs all the time, because it's hard, because now I'm competing against Wikipedia and Reddit and all these other sites that just crush in terms of SEO. But if I can find one of these kind of niche keywords that gets a fair amount of searches, but they don't have a lot of traffic because everybody's going for the home run, that's how I at least that's my strategy. Let's find I'll go for a double and a triple all day long, and let you guys spend, insane amounts of money trying to rank for those upper keywords.
Dave, you touched on this earlier, and this is, I think, one of the, in my opinion anyway, one of the great differentiators of being able to use PodPage as your podcast website is the survey function. And I think for years, and you know this because you podcasted since, the microphone was invented, and you would sit there in your basement and record whatever the episode was, and you'd throw it over the fence and sit and pray and hope like it resonated with people, right? And there was really not like functional ways of being able to communicate with your audience and build community and all of that. And I wanted to just kind of roll it over to you and just kind of talk about the survey functionality that PodPage fairly recently launched and sort of the benefits to podcasters utilizing that.
Yeah, if I go back to, there was a time when Best Buy had all sorts of competition. It was Hyperstore and a bunch of other ones, and CompUSA. And I remember CompUSA probably had the best prices, but the absolute worst experience. You would go in, you would say, I want that computer. They'd go, great. and you'd give them a piece of paper, and then they had to go get, Steve to go back to the back room, and he's going to find you. And then meanwhile, you're just like, all right, well, it's been, 14 minutes. What happened? So consequently, they were one of the first to go out of business because it was a horrible experience. Whereas if somebody had said, why don't you come to CompUSA anymore? And be like, because it's a horrible experience. And then you get a chance to remedy it. I remember once I went to a restaurant here in Akron, Ohio, where I live, and I loved their bread, and they brought it to me, and I took one bite and was like, ugh. And and the waitress came back over. I go, there's something wrong with this. And she said, oh, they forgot to put the salt in the bread. And I go, okay, can I get some salted bread, please? And so she did, and everything was fine. So I scratch my head because somebody will say, well, I'm trying to grow my audience. And I'll be like, great. What did you learn when you did the survey? And they go, what do you mean? And I go, there's a survey built into, PodPage with questions from Tom Webster, and they're like, oh, I didn't even know it was there. But even then, after they know it's there, I'm not quite sure why. Maybe because we're afraid if we put it out there and say, what do you think, that it's all going to be negative.
Right.
And from my travels, it's rarely all negative. It's like, oh, I love this. I love this. I love this. This could use a little work. And it's funny because if you ask any podcaster to quote their 1-star review, mine is a horrible show for a horrible product. I can quote that. Now, ask me to quote a 5-star review, can't think of one. We love to focus on the negative stuff, but
yeah,
the best way to find out, why aren't people listening longer than 38% when I check my Apple stats? Well, I don't know, maybe ask the people that are listening. It's really not that, and it just, one of my backgrounds when I got out of college first, I was a copier technician. And when you walked into the building where I was employed, there was this ginormous neon yellow sign with giant black letters that just said constant improvement. And that was our mantra. And so I've always just thought I can always make this better. I can always make this better. And one of my favorite people on the planet is Steve Stewart. And I just got to Podfest, I think it was. He's like, hey, you want to go to lunch? And I go, yeah, let's go to lunch. So we go to lunch and we're talking, and Steve's like, hey, can I kind of give you a little and I'm like, oh, by all means, let's do it. He goes, there are times when the curmudgeon kind of comes out in some of these groups. And he goes,
wow.
he goes, the patience is sometimes not, he goes, usually you're very patient. He goes, there've been a couple of times when, wow, Dave, and I go, dude, thank you so much. I go, I love negative feedback because it gives me a chance to improve. Because if we go back to the restaurant, kind of analogy here, how many times have you gone to a restaurant and the Coke is warmer than your burger? You're like, ugh, and then you're checking out and they're like, how was everything? And you're like, oh, it was good. And then you give them your money and you never go back. So the fact that anybody ever says, hey, Dave, do you know you have 10 seconds of nothing in the middle of your show? Like, oh, thank you. Let me fix that. So yeah, I'm always a fan of, and then the other thing is they are going to tell you the stuff that they love. So you can do more of that. That's the beauty of it, and you might find out that, you were doing the lightning round and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, I love everything except that lightning round. Well, good. Guess what? You don't have to do the lightning round anymore. Yeah. And now you can focus on more stuff. So yeah, it's a head scratcher. I'm not quite sure. Everybody, come on, pick up your courage and, put out a survey. Your audience will thank you.
Well, yeah, it's like, the worst bosses I ever had were the ones that just said, hey, Chris, you're doing a great job. 5 stars, just keep doing what you're doing. And I'm like, really? You don't have anything that I could do to improve? And so I think that whole leadership thing, it's sort of like if you want your thing to improve, you've got to surround yourself with people that you trust that will tell you how you can improve and be ready for it, right? I think sometimes, Dave, maybe some people just aren't ready to hear the honest truth in order to get better, right? So if somebody were to say, well, Jim and I, we have this partnership, and Jim will say, hey Chris, you say whatnot too much, or and you got to work on that, or I'll say to Jim, like I'm not gonna embarrass Jim, Jim, you got to put your shirt on during a live stream, whatever.
Right.
And so, but we do that because we want to improve the show and we want to improve each other. Right. And so I think if you have somebody that's a listener, that's a fan of School of Podcasting, or whatever, and you say, hey, do you guys like this? Do you not like this? Because you don't really know. That's why you're asking it. And you might get feedback. You're like, holy crap, I didn't even know that this was a clunker. Nobody is going to tell you that stuff outright. This isn't Yelp. You're not going to get all of these people showing up and giving you all these bad reviews. You got to ask for it. And it's so important. Yeah.
It's one of those things. If I ever meet somebody and they go, oh, I listen to your show. I'm like, oh, great. And I'm like, well, you know what's coming. Why do you listen to my show? And they'd be like, oh, I always learn something and you're kind of funny. And I'd be like, great. What do you wish I would change? And then I just shut up. And there's this awkward silence. Yeah. And sometimes if you let it go long enough, they'll go, well, that thing with the cat. I remember when I used to have spots where my cat would interrupt. Yeah. And they'd be like, I'm not really a fan of Bernie. And I'm like, okay, good to know. No more Bernie the cat, or just at least, and if I was in front of you and I had something to write down on or pull out my phone and take a note, the body language is saying, hey, I'm listening. This is important. Whatever's going to come out of your mouth, it's important. And so I'd always just listen. And on occasion, I'd get somebody that would be like, well, this is kind of that. And I always start off it's kind of a joke. I go, hit it, ladies. And then my intro music comes in and somebody found that offensive. And I was like, okay, all right, well, there's a name for you. It's called Not My Target Audience. Okay, good. Thank you. So, it's
that's the other thing too, is like when you solicit feedback, we're not for everyone. I mean,
right.
Like our voices are not for everyone. Our stances, our opinions, our acumen. It's just like some people just aren't going to listen to the show. That's fine. When you put yourself out there, you and I, Dave, were in bands for years. So we know, like getting on stage sometimes in Hattiesburg, Mississippi at Tal's Dart Bar and getting a Schlitz malt liquor bowl thrown at your head. Okay, yeah. I'm not for you, Bill, here at Tal's Dart Bar. So I built up that thick skin. But I think a lot of podcasters or people that are just sort of getting into this, YouTubers or whatever, when they hear that feedback, they immediately are just like, you got to develop some thicker skin, folks. We're not for everyone.
Yeah, that's really because we all want to be loved by everybody. And you just have to realize, I have a friend of mine, Daniel J. Lewis, and Daniel, if I were to describe, he is Mr. Detail oriented. Like he will go a mile deep and an inch wide. Like he'll find this one detail and give you everything you wanted to know about 301 redirects. I will go with 301 redirect is kind of like a change of address form for the internet, right? It's like, that's all we need. This is what it does. Let's move on. And I'm kind of goofy. And so it's funny because Daniel and I used to do a show together. We still do. We do the future of podcasting, but we did another show with Ray Ortega called the Podcasters Roundtable. And so we would have each other's audience go and check out the other person. And both Daniel had somebody that said, hey, I went and listened to your buddy Dave. And man, that guy's like all over the place. He should win an award for ADHD Podcaster of the Year.
Wow.
That kind of stuff.
What?
And then I had somebody go, man, Daniel is dry as yesterday's toast, and that's just the way we are. You either like us or you don't. And those people that don't, here are 27 other shows about podcasting. Yeah, have fun. So, but it's something that takes a little getting used to.
Dave, this has gone by like ridiculously quick, and we haven't yet promoted like. Oh, I'm sorry. You're raising your finger. Go ahead.
I'm raising my finger. I got to answer Jim's question because I never really did. Was it Jim? Dr. Jim?
Yes.
Because he asked about YouTube matching. There are two versions of video stuff in PodPage. On the pro level, we'll make a page that has just your videos. And then the matching, we will basically look at the title of the episode. So if you call it one thing in YouTube and another thing when it comes into PodPage, it won't match, just for the record. Yes. So the YouTube matching feature looks for the episode titles and says, oh, that's the same thing over here on YouTube as it is here. And it will actually add it to the episode. It dawned on me at the end of that answer. I'm like, I don't think I ever answered James' question.
Wow,
So
you have an incredible memory, because I was ready to move on there. I was like, that felt like yesterday.
I just didn't want James going, speaking of not liking people, that guy never answered my question. All right. Continue on. You were saying how this flew by.
No, this is absolutely flew by. And we didn't at all talk about School of Podcasting, which, full disclosure, I'm a member. And everybody's heard previous episodes where I say go to sop.dealcasters.live. And that will get you to School of Podcasting. That's an affiliate link. So you heard me, FTC. And this is a fantastic community. I can't wait for the call tomorrow. I wasn't able to do it last week, Dave. I was traveling for a family wedding, and it's a great community where we share about how to grow each other's shows, and unlimited coaching with the gentleman on your screen. Yes, unlimited coaching. I've asked the most random podcast questions of Dave Jackson, and I get an answer like within hours. It's a fantastic community, and just amazing value. So go to schoolofpodcasting.com. And then, of course, we talked about podpage.com. Dave's the head of podcasting there. We set up Small Business Safari, so that was pretty rad. And then, of course, every Saturday at 10:30 Eastern, this is the place to be. It's Ask the Podcast Coach, and you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com. Just go to YouTube. You're on all the tubes though, Dave, right? So, but like the chat in YouTube is pretty fun. Every Saturday at 10:30, you and Jim Collison. I mean, I don't know how much planning you guys do every Saturday. I feel like you guys you've got some questions that were asked, or asked via Reddit or whatever. But for the most part, it's like, this is generally where it's going to go. But sometimes the chat takes it in all different directions. People join live. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'll go out to Reddit and the podcast movement and Podfest, all the different Facebook groups, and I'll look for questions, and it's kind of hard to find some that aren't the same. How do I start? How do I make money? How do I grow? What's the best microphone? Now, I'm looking for something maybe a little bit outside that. Can I play music in my podcast? Those things, which is kind of hard, but it's always interesting because those are the weeks when I'm like, well, I've got 2 questions. I hope the chat room has something. And the chat room is always amazing. There've been many times when I've looked at Jim, I go, you got anything, Jim? And he's like, not really. And I'm like, all right, come on, chat room, and they do. They come in for us every week. So it's always fun. Yeah, it's a great time.
Awesome. Dave, this has been amazing. Thank you for making our show better, and for saying yes for the second time of coming
years.
aboard. What's that, Jim?
The second time in 5 years.
Second time in 28 years, for coming aboard, Dave. Dave, I'm going to let you have the last word, sir. Anything you want to say in order to send us off, and, related to podcast websites, or, playing guitar, or your love of King's X, the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah. Oh, first, thanks for having me back. It's always fun hanging out with you guys. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks to everyone in the chat room for coming out live. It is so much more fun when there are actually people in the chat room. And if you like what you hear about Dealcasters or the School of Podcasting or anything we talked about tonight, please go tell someone, because that's how podcasts grow, word of mouth. So, and a little tip of the cap to King's X, because they're one of my favorite bands.
Go tell someone. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, don't fear the gear.